our ultimate 2025 Springbok team, every Sunday with André Pretorius.
Yeah, so we've hijacked the like a rugby pod. There's no Envia. I think he had some kind of music reaction. He was at Loftus, and he gets a rash or some kind of allergy when there's too much DJing. So we've taken over the pod. This is a rogue pod, and it's not going to come out on the exact normal time that it normally does. But Andre, I've really been enjoying your series about the backs, and you went through each position, structured them with the weighting of what you need to look for a proper Bok center or wing, and then assigned a score, which I know is a bit random, but in the end, I think it actually came out just right. And then I don't know about you, but have you seen a lot of discussion coming from this? Because it looks like people are really into it.
I have, Harry, and which is great. The one thing I picked up is that people still have favorites, and there are still real fans out there. And then one of the episodes actually spoke about, I was a big fan of Peter Hendricks, and it doesn't matter what anybody said. Peter Hendricks was the best left wing. I hated Jacques Olivier just because Peter Hendricks, Jacques was playing left wing as well, and they were fighting for that jersey. So, and funny enough, I played sevens with Jacques Olivier. He's one of the nicest guys and great mentor. Him and Gerry Engelbrecht at the sevens. But people still have favorites, and there are fans out there of players, and I think that needs to up. I went to go and watch cricket and rugby because I had favorites. The team was a bonus, but if they played well, then I was very happy. So that came out, and then obviously, it just shows the amount of good players South Africa have and the Springboks have that can play in those positions. And what Rassie has done with the depth chart and getting players to be a 10 that can play 12 or to be a 13 that can play wing, and the options that gives, it just opened up that vision to me and say we're on a different level.
No, I love it. And I think people should go back and take a look. So it goes from 15, all the way down, marches down to the number 9s. There's always argument available if you think that actually the most important skill for a wing is this versus that. But we're putting this sort of in the context of the current Springbok setup, what they require. So obviously we talk about lekkerbacks on here. The wings have to double back, double involvements. You're a kick chaser for a long part of the game. You're not going to put your head down. You have to work your way in. So it's not like judging, for example, the New Zealand set of skills that you might have for the backs. But today we're going to dive into my favorite position on the field, number 8. Obviously, we grew up in South Africa calling it 8th man, which was one of your first spelling problems, by the way. Like, where does the A, the G, the H, the T? 8th man, and blind spots aplenty. I always thought Morné du Plessis was the greatest rugby player that was ever born because I love the idea that he was all over the field. So number 8s are all-rounders. In the cricket parlance, it would be your guy who does 50 runs and 5 wickets. You're not going to put him in one or the other. He's both. You put him anywhere on the pitch, you're not worried about your number 8. You're not going, oh my God, no, he gets the ball in the space. It's okay. Number 8s can handle. We all grow up with a coach telling us what it is, and the higher we go, the more specialized positions become. When you're playing a light tee, barefoot, Saturday morning, it's more just best available player gets stuck with the ball somewhere. And 8 often is that guy. You're number 10 and number 8. But as you get higher up, there's more specialization. What's interesting about this position, Andre, today is that when we talk about 8s, every loose forward thinks they can play 8. Every loose forward can actually be shunted over to number 8, and nothing bad happens immediately. You don't have to walk to a line out and throw in a ball. So Kwagga Smith can line up against Ireland at number 8. It's only in the carnage, when you look at it later, there was too many slip tackles or ball in contact lost, and you realize there's a meaningful difference between a proper, certified Artie Savea, Kalen Doris, Greg Aldrit, Jasper Wiese, Duane Vermeulen, and someone who's playing in that position alongside them. And I thought about it. I had a really influential coach growing up at provincial level, first representative team. We'll call him Potgieter, but that's what I'll call him. So Potgieter had a pipe, and he always used to walk around the practice fields as he got to know the floppy-haired kids from Cape Town, and he was, from the Boerland. And he would just kind of say these things to us. As he picked you for a position, he would just say a thing. It was like God talking. It was really important what he said. And he would say a thing, and then he would wait and say another thing. And so he was picking me as the 8, and he said, "Hey, you're my number 8." And then he's walking around puffing his pipe, and he's like, "Be a bear." And I was like, "Oh, okay, be a bear." And then he'd walk around the field, come back, and he'd say, "Be our bear." And I would go home at night, go, "What does that mean?" I would look in the old-fashioned encyclopedia, bear, oh, okay, what did the bear do? Sense of smell, hibernation, what was it meaning? I think I got from that, play big and win space, if you're going to be in a space, be the alpha male, the predator. And so he would do that. And then, in a final practice before our actual first match, he said something else. He said, "See the map." And then puff, puff, puff. Be the map. I was like, I don't know where you're coming from, man. But I've always thought about that ever since. It's like a bear with a map in his head. And when I just say these names, just think about these guys' names and think about maybe that it does make sense. Morne Duplessis, Tulupe Falatau, Zinzan Brook, Buck Shelford, Sergio Parise, Gary Teichmann. You can almost see that these guys did see the field really well because they linked. They were the back of the lineout, yes. They were the back of 20 scrums in those days sometimes. So your decision whether to pick and go, which side to go, your communications with the backs. And then, the back of the lineout was a no jump zone and a lot of scrappy ball back there. So it kind of made sense to me that you have to see the game as if you have that camera in your car. When you're backing up nowadays, sometimes you might have a camera in your vision. An 8's got to see the game like that. And we have some really clever bears right now playing number 8. Kalen Doris, to our chagrin, was really good in that Irish series. It's a shame that he's injured for Lions because he's one of the greats now. Kieran Reid was a guy who tortured us as an All Black. Remember how he always had that perfect beard, 4 days, not ever growing a beard, but almost a beard. He won the coin toss every time, I feel like. And then if you needed someone to hide the ball in the trams and then offload it to someone, and get him away, that was Reid. I think Duane Vermeulen, we just saw one of the greats. At his peak, Duane Vermeulen was just one of the best in terms of ball skills, ability to see the pitch, to know when to do something, to be both evasive and to win contact. So we have a problem, which is who's the successor in Springbok Rugby to Duane Vermeulen. I mean, he still played in 2023. And, you got the feeling that if he had been just a little bit more healthy or had one less year on his legs, he would have started, continued throughout. But Jasper Wiese is the incumbent. And then we think now we have a host of people challenging, but I think it just comes down to a couple. And also around the world, we see guys like Greg Oldreet that are classic 8, but we also see guys like Ari Surveyor, who's not really a classic 8. So, Andre, who do you think? I mean, you look at the world right now, and there was this sort of classic size of a number 8, 1.88 to 1.94-ish, between 108, maybe 120 kilograms. Some big heavy boys as well sometimes, like Wycliffe Palu or Kefu. But they all have to go all 80. I mean, your 8 has to go 80. So when you look at the world now, do you still think it's important to have a proper 8? Or are you okay with this idea of a Ben Earl or, kind of just stuff someone in there that can run around and pretend to be an 8? Which do you like?
I think, Gary, it's funny you should mention that, the position you played was 8 because your other name's also the fixer, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, in those days, it felt like the 8 had to go and fix the back's mistakes. He needed to drop back. He needed to go and pick up loose balls. He needed to go and clean rucks where the backs were looking at, are you going in or am I going in? The 8 would go, I'll go in, boys. You get us in the next phase. And I think the game's evolved into a game where everybody needs to be able to secure ball. Everybody needs to be able to carry ball and secure ball through your ball carries. So I'm of the meaning where I think your 8 needs to be able to play 6 and 7. Maybe not a classic 6 like we are used to, but that's also changing in the way that we are selecting teams. You don't have to be a Brousseau or Watson or, one of those true fetchers.
Pocock, yeah.
Pocock, those types of fetching sixes. So I think I prefer a eight that can do the jobs of the other loosies, but specializing in eight. I think where the difference comes in is if you're going to have an eight that can't jump in the line out,
Yeah.
or is not a specialized line out player, that becomes a problem. And then obviously he's just a non-jumping eight. Or when he is changing positions, he needs to be able to know where the sevens jump, if he's jumping at 2 in the line out, or he's jumping at the back is at 8, or if they use the 6. Some teams get a 6 to walk in on a 61 and to jump there. So I think that becomes a bit of an issue when you look at that. But playing wise, I mean, defensively for us, if opposition teams are setting up to kick a contestable, our 8 drops back early.
Yep.
To go and assist. So these role changes. A lot of teams are doing that at the moment anyway. So you get him back on first phase defense. If he's not a great contestant in the line out, he's defending in what we call Chinatown, just in that outside the vacuum. We want double hits, and you want a guy that can defend there. But also, if he needs to fold, the speed needs to be there. He needs to cover that space on the next phase. So no, I think I'd prefer someone like a Hanekom or Visa's an 8 that defends like a 6, for instance.
Yep.
I'd prefer those types of players in there, unless it's to your detriment in the lineouts.
You know, it's very interesting because there's nothing per se that says the guy carrying your 8 on the jersey has to do X, Y, and Z.
Sure.
But there are things that you need from a team. And one of those is high carry and close quarter tackling and the hang back on the kick. So if you're doing that, you're not chasing a lot of kicks as well, because a lot of those kicks are kicks to get a kick back. So Falatau was always a hang back guy, and then he would do his storming run. Duane Vermeulen made, his whole career on that idea. Safe hands, never drop the ball, would always make the gain line, engage 2 or 3 tacklers. He's one of the top levels. Visa does that. Roos does that. Hanekom does that. And another guy we're going to talk about does that, which is making 2 tacklers be interested. And if you make that tackle also skeptical, like you don't know if it's actually going to be completed, then you interest a third guy who's just hanging around, and suddenly you've created space out of nothing. The other thing is, if CJ Standard played 8, and he was Joe Schmidt said he would accept 15 to 20 carries every game. So I didn't have to worry in my 120, 140 carry plan, where will I get the lion's share? I already had 2 of them done. I had CJ and Henshaw or something. And so the same thing, I think, in 8s for Buckball is that guy's going to truck it up in the worst possible situations. You're giving your 8 a lot of the carries that are not going to give you good meters. But you still have to not lose ground. The famous moment in 2023 World Cup is Jasper picking from the base. There's no time left, and he just has to survive in the tackle. He doesn't have to make, in fact, he could lose 5. It doesn't matter. He just has to be able to present the ball in such a way that someone can kick it out, almost fall down, kick it out, and there's the cup. But I think that's interesting. You talk about evolution from 80s to aughts and to nows. Because if there was going to be a position that did evolve, it would be number 8. And here's why. We invented the number 8 position in South Africa. 1920s, it used to be whoever got rocked up to the scrum, you just went in whoever got there first. So there was generally a 3-3-2 or a 3-2-3, but there was never a 3-4-1. Didn't exist in the whole world. And they would rock up and you just go in, and whoever stuffed their head in first got in there. It was detachable. It was there were some wing forwards, they called them. The wing forwards were just those guys on the edge of that back 3. So you had a flank and an 8 and a flank before they were called that. They were called wing forwards. So Stellenbosch, the Marties, were having a lot of trouble with the Ikeys. UCT was beating them all the time, and the guy that was beating them in the 1920s was this guy named Benny Osler, a wonderful player who, like you, played 10, and one thing we know now, then, and forever is you have a 10 who can control a game with his foot. It's a big thing, and it can negate everything else. So the Marties were frustrated with none of their loose forwards getting to touch him and get him, hurt him, put him on the ground. And so the Marties, in the sort of stroke of genius, invented this forward setup where it was 3-4-1, and they just moved their wing forwards one position up, and that one little movement made them able to get to the 10 quicker. And so that became the thing in South Africa. By 1928, the Boks were doing the same thing. They'd taken up the Marties' way of doing it. And what they didn't know, because inventions sometimes have these hidden benefits, is because it made the scrum better. It literally was a better way to push the scrum. All Blacks were stubborn. They didn't want to do it. I think it was in the late 30s before the All Blacks kind of said, okay, we'll do the first row, second row, and then the eighth man by himself. So the reason why I'm saying that is because the position wasn't really a thing. It wasn't really recognized as its own thing until the 1920s, 30s, and then people called it different stuff. I think the Australians called it the anchor man, which is interesting. Other one is a solo lock. I think the English called it a solo lock. And finally, in South Africa, they said, no, it's the eighth man. And that's what it became until the Kiwis said, no, it's a number 8. And now we just use that because it's easier. But when I look at that and I think about the idea of an anchor or a solo, it is one of the positions on the field, even if you're behind a scrum that's doing well and you're deciding how much to football it, soccer it, and pick and go, like you saw yesterday, Cameron Hanekom just doing it just right, using Roan Nortje as sort of shield and then battling 3 guys to get over the try line. Or you're also at the back of a scrum that's disintegrating and you've got to make a big decision really quickly. And the last thing you want to do is your team to see you knock it on or fumble it. So it's a position of confidence, like a fullback, in that if your 8 is stumbling, you really feel bad. So we looked at the different sort of attributes, and one thing I thought about was there's no way getting around it. The way we play number 8s is they have to be able to carry and they have to be able to tackle. And I cannot even separate them. So I'm just calling it the carry tackle, the gain line, the trench carry, the carry when you know you're going to get tackled. We're putting that as a 40% of the whole because the way that everything is set up, you're not really saying to your tight headlock or your loose head prop that you're going to get this many carries. You're going to look for it from your loose forwards, but you need your other 2 loose forwards. We're going to call the blindside flank the bouncer, the bar bouncer, and we're going to look at, a proper fetcher, a 6 as the bank robber. If those guys are doing what they're supposed to do, somebody has to carry the ball 12, 14, 16 times, and someone has to tackle 12, 14, 16 times. It's not always going to be the blindsider who does that. And sometimes you have to both do it. So there's no way around it. The repetitive nature of that carry tackle and the dominance of it, your first ruck, your second ruck, your third ruck, being able to assemble it and get momentum is a sign of good teams. Interesting about this position is it's not always the position where you think, that's why that team won the World Cup, or that's why that team won. But when you look at the teams that did, they almost always have someone that you really think is good. Kieran Reid, Duane Vermeulen, Lawrence Delaglio. I mean, it's like you literally think of the guy as sort of the man on the field who wouldn't give up. So what do you think about carrying that first category as being the load, the carry, the tackle? Do you see it that way too?
Harry, for sure. I think a high volume carry, high volume tackler is definitely a top priority for your 8. And where they find themselves, it's a determining factor for second, third phases for attack and defense. And once you get that wrong, either side of that coin, the other side gets an advantage and they set early, they can defend the next phase a bit earlier, and your attack just snowballs. And that's why we'll go through the clips later, but because these guys are exposed to such high volume carries and tackles, if you've got 12 carries, 15 carries, and you expose the ball in the carry 15 times, percentage-wise, you're going to start losing ball either in the air because guys are going to start working out. Now, where they are lucky is these boys are really powerful, and their footwork is of such a nature where they get into really small spaces. It looks like nothing, but just missing the double shot by this much gives you an extra inch into that seam, and you can keep the ball, even though you put it in the wrong arm. So I think it's so much more important for them to get the technique right of this, of their carries, to be able to ask another question from the defense. And like I said, we'll get to it in the clips. And the same with the tackling. It's if you get an 8 that's not getting front on tackles most of the time, now some of them tackle, they soak because they want to steal, and I understand that. But if you're not getting to the ball, you're costing yourself a number on the defense, and what you're actually doing is you're speeding the ball up for them even more because there's no tackle fight. So just on that, I think having fundamental or basic fundamental strengths within those categories is very important for them.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we're good on that 40%, the lion's share, the biggest category, not the majority, but a lion's share of it being in that tackle and carry zone. It's in the funnel, we'll call it, in that they don't often get first ball wider than third channel, and they're being asked to take people who are steaming down their channel. So it's a stopper. It's the ability to take on not just your opposing number, but just, Courtney Laws and Mara Toje coming down the channel. You're looking at your 8 and saying you should be able to stop that boy in his tracks.
Yeah.
And if you aren't able, you're a good player, but you're not a test 8, because you're always going to look at your test 8 as a bear, able to stand him up and grapple and wrestle. I heard a lot of stories that must be true then about of all the guys in the box setup, the current box setup or recent, that the one you wouldn't want to wrestle is Duane Vermeulen. It doesn't matter what his numbers are in the weight room. Doesn't matter what his bench press is. Doesn't matter. He's just a guy you wouldn't want to grapple with. And I think grappling skills is something we think of Jasper Wiese, and we realize, yeah, it's just difficult to put him down. I've watched so many games when he played for Leicester Tigers where on a small pitch, on a damp day, I think the plan was just give it to Jasper. And he became the highest volume carrier. He played the most minutes. He was routinely voted, 1 or 2 as the most popular player by the players in that league. So he's definitely a person that when he came into the setup, I didn't worry about this part. I thought on the carry and the tackle, and let's just include in that the quality of it, where you, like you said, engage 2 tacklers, or you present really well. The ball will be presented properly by your 8. And you think about these guys: Aldrit, Kalen Doris, Audie Savea, Vermeulen. You never had to worry about that. I worried more about the next problem. The next category I've got set up here is ball skills. You need your 8 to be unusually good with the ball in hand, the ball in space, to not be a guy who loses the ball. And again, when you think about these old, I guess the great 8s of the game, that does come to mind. These are good handle guys, Falatau, Morne Duplessis, Deichmann, Shelford, Parise. And I wondered, when Jasper first came in, I wondered if he was looking around enough. Could he see? Did he have a map? Or was he just a bear, that came out of the hibernation cave ready to eat? I didn't know if he was or was not. And I think Jasper would be the first one to say that he did have to grow on that. I talked to Kobus, his brother, recently, and he was joking about that. He said, "Yeah, I'm teaching Jasper how to pass the ball." So it wasn't something they both grew up with around. When you think about ball skills for an 8, just take me through that. The scenarios are usually you've got a restart. Number 8's the most frequent person to catch the restart for the forwards. You want that guy passing, or do you want him to take it to ground and present? And then the next part of play is what we call general phase play.
Just before we get there, do you think the skills of the 8 there was a bigger emphasis on that after, let's say, a guy like Bobby Skinstad and Joe Fanico started playing 8, showcasing skills that you'd normally see from backline players. Do you think that's where that category got put onto the 8s list and said, now our 8s need to, not to be as flashy, but they need to be able to do that?
So Mornay du Plessis was definitely a guy. Everyone who's watched him will know when he was playing on the field, Western Province with Rob Lowe, there was plenty of offloading. Didn't even call it offloading. Yeah. Over the shoulder passing, variety. But it seemed weird. Like people from New Zealand would say that's too loose. So that was the difference. I think you're exactly right. There came a time in history of rugby where that was considered normal. And I think it was with the advent of guys like Big Joe, where he could do all the proper stuff. Like no one would ever say Big Joe couldn't do it. But he was more interested in that one magic moment, the money ball. And if he could find it, he knew, and Bobby did too, that the game was going to be broken open. I think, what popularized it then around the world was this idea of an attack launched by forwards that suddenly included backs, that suddenly included forwards, included backs, and then how do you defend that? Whereas the idea of like, okay, now the forwards are mauling me, they're driving, and they're doing pick and goes, okay? And then over here, the ball's out wide, and we defend it that way. When you mix those two, it becomes, there was that moment where the scores all ballooned out, and then, defense won again, and now we're back in the age of attack. But I think I think you're right. I think that people now look for an 8, especially an 8, to have the skills to free the hands in contact, get through, and ignite something on the side.
I'd love to see the your 8 has got to be an offloader because he gets so many carries. And if you're an attack coach that wants to avoid rucks, you want that 8 to be able to get rid of the ball. He needs to do a lot before that, and that we'll get to. But I think the other thing we want to see is that when you've got 8s running balls back at kick returns, you want your 8 to be able to identify, firstly, where am I going to run into, right? But secondly, and this is to your point about the ball skills, you want an 8 that can make a decision and then make the pass to the next channel off the, let's say, a kick that they read and they kick the deep, one pass to the 8, doesn't just carry, identifies that their corner is narrow, makes a wide pass, and you get to run into a lot more space. Your next phase looks a lot different. So I think it's very important that your 8 has those skills. I think Visa, it's not something that I would put down and say this is probably one of his strengths, is a 10-15 meter pass. I think he can do it. I think he can do it both ways. But I think if he gets the ball in the middle, he's probably going to look to carry first.
Yeah.
He's not going to look to play the space unless the communication comes from the outside. Whereas I think there's different 8s that would try and get onto that outside and make that longer pass. So the offload skill is going to be important. I think also if your game model is your 8 to run inside the trams, they need to be able to get rid of pressure balls. So they might be the money ball. There's a good read from a back. If they get rid of it, you've got probably a 3-on-1. The good 8s, they hold their feet, they catch the ball early, they get rid of it. Typical great catch and pass skill. Whereas if you're a carrying 8, you're probably not going to take advantage of that opportunity.
No, I love that you point that out, because it's not just the ability to do the action, it's the decision whether or not to do it. And the offload that wasn't offloaded, that for a darn good reason, is one of the best things in rugby. England was playing Alex Dombrand for a while, Harlequin's guy, and at club level, it's brilliant because he's always looking to offload. But the lost offloads at Test rugby will kill you. I mean, literally 3 or 4 of those on the floor, and we saw what Archie Snyman having such a wonderful season on offloading, and then Leinster runs into Saints, and they use those balls to survive and to win. So, I think for sure Visa's, first thought of carry tackle is more important than the ball skills. The ball skills themselves, it's not just about making the miracle play, it's about making the right decision. Yeah. And that's where probably he still needs to grow. We look at guys like Dan Dupree that are playing for Sale, and he's a guy that looks to offload a lot, and I think it's almost held him back. I don't think he's in our conversation because Rassi and those guys are watching how many times that doesn't come off. Kwacha in his stint at 8, same thing. Siya Kolisi's been playing 8 for Sharks a little bit this season, and the tendency to go a little bit too loose before you've made the yards, the hard yards, as Duane always talked about. I think you're right. So there's no way around it. Elrich Lowe actually had a really good, I thought he played well at 8 when he saw it, because he kind of knew that my first job is to be the bear, and then I've got a map I can see. My third category is that, seeing the field, seeing the pitch, feeling the game. And by this, I mean, what are you doing off the ball to get in the right place for where the play is going to be? So I'm gonna go ahead and say Kieran Reid was one of the best at that. He played off of Richie McCaw and Jerome Kano, so it's nice. But still, someone had to, he had to get to the position where he could make that final offload in some of those incredible matches with the Boks. So the big carry, tackle, gain line machine, the balls, the subtle ball skills, not losing the ball in contact, presenting well, and making the offloads. And then this next category is just understanding, the map of the game. Be a smart, clever forward. When you see that category, what comes to mind? And is that how you see it as well? Your 8 has to be one of the forwards who can see the game.
Yes, and it's the identification. It's not just calling the ball to carry it up. While the ball's getting kicked back, you're the eyes of the catcher. You're looking up, going, I don't want this ball. There's loads of kick space behind. Kick it to A1 or B2 or whatever your calls are. So firstly, it's that being in that situation, being the eyes of the catcher. Then if you're running in trams, you're probably going to be setting up on blind sides, getting up off that, scanning immediately, looking for opportunities for teams that overfold, looking for opportunities to run into vacuums of ruck defense that's not set, etc. I think that's exactly what you said about Duane. Duane was always looking for opportunities. And I think as you get older, you want to stop running into walls, so you have to be more clever. So if you're going to run onto weak shoulders and guys not set yet, I'd prefer to do that. So definitely seeing the field. There's a clip I'll show of Cameron Hanekom. On the way to the ruck, you can see him looking up, seeing that the fold is slow. This guy's waiting for the fold, so he's not 100% set at the ruck, and then he picks and goes from there within the phase. If it's a play or not, I don't think so. I think it's Cameron Hanekom seeing the field, looking up, and then all the 8s coming off the back of a scrum, firstly controlling, like you said, any type of ball that's been kicked, hooked, getting there, just getting off the ground, getting off the back of the scrum, and then determining, have I beaten the Lucy? Where's the space? There's a great clip of Evan Roos that we'll look at where he gets off the side, beats the Lucy, and then one of the backs got a late jump, so there was this inverse little dog leg, and he went straight to that space, which means he saw it, he's looking at the field. So that's a big one, not just for your own play, but being the eyes of the players around you.
That takes time. I think you have to see enough pictures for them to replicate and then flash back into your mind and then be ahead. And the guys we're going to talk about, I think all of them are at that phase now. They were not necessarily at that phase 2 years ago, but they're starting to see it. My final category, so we went through the carry, the ball skills, the seeing the field, is durability, the 80-ness of you. Can you go 80? There's just no way around it. And in a strange way, when you go heavy on the bench and you even go to 7-1, someone's still going to be the one who stays. And so that has tended to be, whether it's Kalen Doris, Greg Aldreet, Artie Savea, Visa, Vermeulen before him, it tended to be the number 8. There's no way around it. Is that because the number 8 possesses particular kind of skills? No, it's the readiness and the load that they have to carry, and the fact that it's just not for everyone, and so can you go 80 and then can you play 12 tests in a year? Everyone can get injured. There's no way around it. There's luck. and the body is the body. But there are some players, either because they're, I don't know, got some ancient roots in them that hasn't evolved out. They've got bone structure because they have particular gifts that are genetic. They just don't stay injured very long. And they also come back really well. And they also, in the moment itself, people bounce off them. And there's other people who are plenty strong, incredibly tough, but they get injured more. So we're reserving that as sort of a weird wild card here. But if you think about it, it can really change selection practices. Okay, so now we've got the categories agreed to, I think. There's obviously some slippage here and there, but we have the main categories. We have the skill sets. And what we're going to do now is in our next show, we're going to go through each of the incumbents, but also the challengers and the dark horse for the Springboks at number 8, and take us through each category, assign a score, and then we're going to get into Andre's clips. So you're going to show us and tell us a little bit about what you see, and we're going to comment on it. So come back and join us.
Right, Harry, I look forward to that one. And I think there's going to be a couple of surprises waiting for the people, and there'll be some clarity on why these gentlemen are so good.
Our ultimate 2025 Springbok team every Sunday with André Pretorius.